I'll never forget the night I decided to cross Gem's Crossing alone. The villagers' warnings echoed in my mind, but I told myself it was just superstition. I've heard ghost stories before, everyone has, but something about the way they spoke of her lingered in my thoughts like a bad omen. Her name was Choden. They said she'd been a young woman from Lingji village, as beautiful as the first bloom of spring, but burdened with a fate she could not accept. She was promised to a man she despised, and on the eve of her wedding she fled to the mountains. The cold, unyielding mountains. Her story should have ended there with her body claimed by frost and exhaustion. But it didn't. Her spirit, they said, remained, tethered to that narrow, treacherous path called Gem's Crossing. Don't travel after dusk, the villagers had warned me. She's still waiting. But I was stubborn, or maybe just foolish. The mist was thicker than I'd expected that night. It clung to the air, swirling around my ankles like cold fingers. Every step I took felt heavier than the last, my boots crunching against the rocky trail. I'd walked this path before, but somehow it felt different this time. The silence pressed against my ears, broken only by the distant cry of a raven. I'd almost convinced myself that the villagers' stories were nothing but tales for children, until I heard it. A sound so faint, it barely registered at first. Weeping. Soft, broken sobs drifting through the mist. I stopped in my tracks, every hair on my body standing on end. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far either. The kind of sound you'd swear was right behind you if you listened too long. It's just the wind, I muttered to myself, forcing my legs to keep moving. I'd heard how the wind can play tricks on you in the mountains, twisting through the rocks and cracks to sound like voices. But with every step, the sobbing grew louder, closer. My breath came in shallow bursts, fogging the cold air in front of me. Then, I saw her. She stood in the middle of the path, a figure draped in white, her long hair billowing in the icy wind. Her back was to me, and I'll admit it, I've never felt fear like that before. It wasn't the fear of danger or wild animals. It was the cold, primal fear of the unknown. I'd seen too many shapes in the fog that turned out to be nothing. But this was different. "Leave me alone," I shouted, clutching my prayer beads like they were my last lifeline. My voice echoed off the cliffs, and for a moment, all was still. The sobbing stopped. Slowly, she turned. Her face. I'll never forget that face. Pale as moonlight, her eyes hollow and sunken, like there was nothing left behind them but darkness. Her lips moved, but no sound came out at first. Then she whispered, "Why did you leave me here?" Her eyes locked onto mine, and I froze. My breath caught in my throat, my legs refused to move. She wasn't talking to me. I knew that. She was speaking to someone from a time long gone, to the life she'd lost, the betrayal she'd never forgiven. But that didn't matter. Her gaze pinned me to the spot as if I'd been the one to leave her behind. My fingers trembled, and the prayer beads slipped from my hand. I watched them fall, hitting the rocky path with a quiet clatter. I didn't dare reach down to pick them up. My heart thundered in my chest, and all I could do was stare as she took one slow step toward me. Her nails, long, sharp, and jagged, scraped against the stone as she moved. The sound was worse than the sobbing. It wasn't fast. It wasn't sudden. It was deliberate. One step, then another. I'd like to think I screamed, but if I did, I didn't hear it. My mind was a storm of panic, every instinct fighting to run, but my body wouldn't obey. The cold seeped into my bones, and with each step she took, my vision blurred. It wasn't just fear. It was something more. Something older. Something ancient. When they found me the next morning, I'm told I was lying in the middle of the path, clutching the broken remains of my prayer beads. My fingers had turned blue from the cold, and my face... They said my face was frozen in terror, eyes wide as if I'd seen death itself. I don't remember any of that. I only remember her eyes, hollow, empty, full of pain and something worse. I'm home now, but the whispers followed me. Late at night, when the house is still and the world is quiet, I hear it. The soft sound of weeping just beyond my window. Faint but steady. I've stopped looking outside at night. I know she's there.